All right, so we only have a little bit of time left, and there's two questions that I definitely want to get to. And this one is one that I'm really interested to know about. And you talked a little bit about how the world is doing its best to learn as much from this experience as possible. I want to know in the next 5 to 10 years, what will we have learned that we can implement and be more proactive so that, there is going to be a next pandemic. How can we ensure that it's not as severe as this one has been? What can we do as individuals, and what can we do as businesses, organizations, and governments?
I think from a global community standpoint, innovation is going to be key. Not only to limiting the damage, but to ending this thing and rebuilding in a more sustainable and kind of future savvy way. There's a lot of opportunity to rethink the way we're doing things right now. Vaccines, diagnostics, and medicines are only the beginning of that innovation. We're also going to need new policies and platforms and approaches to limit the spread, minimize damage to economies and well-being of these kinds of events, right? So after this, and all of the lessons we'll learn, the world, I think, will inevitably be far more ready to deal with the new emerging diseases with pandemic potential, unless it starts tomorrow. but people living in developing countries still live in societies and have health systems where it can be difficult to intervene rapidly and effectively. I think it's reasonable to expect people will demand improvements in the quality and coverage of their public health systems, ensuring universal health coverage is in place, social support and medical care, that these are human rights. Greater attention to managing the secondary effects these kinds of events have, and more heed, I think, to be given to advice of scientific experts. I think a move towards localization and strengthening local capacity, having stores of personal protective equipment and response, products used in the response. I think all of that needs to be part of local capacity strengthening. There's clearly a need for strengthened international collaboration and coordination, which I think will require new ways of structuring and funding our most important multilateral institutions, with low and middle income countries and private sector and citizens playing a greater role. In other words, I think we need to ensure that basic healthcare reaches everyone, everywhere, so that outbreaks can be discovered more quickly. And we need organizations like the WHO to remain funded and healthy and strong, so that, they can coordinate global responses. For the majority of my life, working or otherwise, I've done all that I can to establish relationships with people from and in other countries and cultures. Not only has it been fun and enlightening, it's also necessary, right, to strengthen the global safety net against, I'd say, most of the major threats to human existence today. Whether the next global pandemic or global financial collapse or World War III or climate change or extreme poverty, whatever, all of these are examples of, clear and present dangers that can really only be addressed through global collaboration and partnership. And that means between businesses and governments and NGOs and civil society and academia, etc. So my short answer is we need to have a more global and collectivist mentality and lens, and we need to start seeing the other as part of ourselves. You asked about the kind of bigger kind of global response and then the individual response.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
And I guess at the individual level, it's somewhat related to what we can do at the global level in terms of seeing others as ourselves. This answer might come off as somewhat glib, but I think one of the most important things we can do as individuals is to make sure we're supporting the right kinds of institutions and electing the right kinds of leaders who think about the big picture and understand our interconnectedness and see things from more of a systems perspective. And certainly that's not to take away from our own individual actions, which of course are key. We need to be operating at both of those levels. And so with regard to our own actions, I think it really comes down to living more conscientiously and thinking about how our individual actions can impact the whole of society. What we're doing right now, the sacrifices we're all making, staying at home and giving up some of the luxuries that we've become accustomed to and perhaps taken for granted, is a great example of that. We know that what we're doing is for the greater good, and that our discipline and sense of responsibility in doing our part to care for the whole of society is making a difference. So I mean, I think cultivating that sense of responsibility, staying home when you and your kids are sick, washing your hands and maintaining good hygienic practices, which for many people in the world isn't as straightforward as you might think, eating less meat and thinking about our choices as consumers. Where are our products coming from? How do they get to us? Many of them reliant on deforestation and thereby the threat of emerging diseases, which are very closely linked. Understanding these concepts of kind of a one planet economy, these are within our own capacity and control. And I know that some of these things can seem far removed from our own individual actions, but they're not. We can't change these things if we as individuals don't change our own behaviors. So becoming more aware of these relationships and complexities, rather than living happily in our bubbles, and ensuring this awareness becomes. Those are my daughters.
Oh, good. My kids are upstairs with mom.
Yeah, they're supposed to be,
Let me out.
So, yeah, I think becoming more aware of these relationships and complexities, rather than living in our bubbles, and ensuring this awareness becomes kind of second nature to us as individuals, like knowing our times tables, is something I really think we need to focus on and pass on to our kids.